The laughter around the champagne tower shimmered like glass, delicate and dishonest. James stood near the edge of the company ballroom, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a drink he hadn't tasted in an hour. The clink of wine glasses, polished shoes against marble, and French phrases floating over catered hors d'oeuvres filled the room like white noise. Rachel stood across the room, radiant in a pale lavender gown, her smile turned slightly, just enough to face William, the man she once studied abroad with. The man she hadn't seen, supposedly, in years. James noticed how close they stood, the way her wine glass tilted toward his chest, how her voice dropped, velvet in tone, every vowel blooming with affection. Then William leaned in, brushed a finger against the rim of her glass, and spoke in soft, fluid French. Si j'étais revenu avec toi à l'époque, serais-je ton mari aujourd'hui? James blinked slowly, heart steady, breathing even. Rachel didn't hesitate. She laughed. Then replied, voice light and unguarded, bien sûr que oui, tu sais que j'ai toujours pensé à toi. The word sliced clean, no jagged edges, just the precision of a scalpel. She thought James didn't understand, that the man standing 20 feet away, who had paid for her graduate semester in Lyon, who once rearranged his schedule to accommodate her midnight time zone calls, who spent 7 months teaching himself French because he had wanted to surprise her, had remained the same oblivious man. He hadn't. Rachel swirled her glass and turned slightly, her hand brushing William's sleeve like muscle memory. I'm glad you came tonight, she said aloud in English this time, smiling softly, unaware James was watching her reflection in the floor-length mirror behind the bar. It's been so long. William leaned closer. You've changed, but in all the right ways. You haven't, she murmured. That's the problem. James tilted the drink to his lips, but didn't sip. His reflection was clear, still, just as unreadable as always. He stepped forward slowly, quietly, as if approaching the edge of something final. He reached them mid-laugh. Rachel turned, caught off guard. James, she said, half startled, half apologetic, we were just... He smiled gently, gaze shifting to William, then to her. You two look like you're having a wonderful time. William raised his glass. It's always good to reconnect, old friends, good wine. James nodded, gaze unflinching, then, in perfect, fluid French, said, Alors je vous souhaite à tous les deux une vie pleine de bonheur. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness. Rachel froze, the blood drained from her face so quickly it seemed time had paused. You speak French? She asked, voice smaller than a whisper. James took one small sip of his untouched drink, then set the glass down. I learned it the first year you went abroad, he said, voice calm. I just never had a chance to use it. He looked at her evenly. And I won't need it again. He turned and walked away before the glass stopped trembling in her hand. James had always believed that love wasn't something to be declared loudly, it was something to be done, every single day, quietly, completely. He remembered the first time he saw Rachel, sunlight catching the edge of her smile, notebook clutched against her chest, the wind blowing cherry blossom petals into her hair outside the university library. She had been complaining about a professor's outdated syllabus, talking too fast, laughing too freely, and James had just stood there, watching the world tilt. They met in a language elective. She was studying French for a semester abroad. He was only there to fulfill a credit. She called him quiet, he called her brilliant. She teased that he had the emotional range of a table lamp. He didn't mind. When she first took his hand and leaned in with that soft whisper, "Don't ever leave me," he believed it, with his whole being. Back then, Rachel had dreams as wide as skylines. France will change everything, she told him once, clutching a stack of scholarship papers. I want to breathe different air, learn who I am when I'm not just someone's daughter or girlfriend. He smiled and nodded. And when she left, he didn't stop her. Instead, he started learning French on his own. 3 hours a night, podcasts while commuting, flashcards tucked in his wallet. He dreamed of surprising her, one day. Maybe over a cafe table in Paris. Susan had been the first to notice. You're killing yourself, she'd said, watching him fight sleep at the campus cafe while poring over a beginner's grammar book. She was his colleague, a senior project lead. Brilliant, steady. The kind of person who noticed when someone hadn't eaten or was pretending they were fine. She's worth it, James had replied simply, eyes not leaving the page. Susan didn't argue, but she was the only one who ever saw the side of James that Rachel never looked closely enough to see. Orsted, loyal to the bone. When Rachel came back from France a year later, she seemed different. Her lipstick shades were subtler, her laughs took longer to come. She used phrases like, "back when we were young," and James would stare at her, confused. They were both 26. Still, he tried so hard it broke the rhythm of his days. He stopped smoking, cold turkey, after Rachel said she couldn't stand the smell. He learned to cook low-oil food because her skin had grown sensitive to grease. He stopped scheduling late meetings because she said she wanted to feel prioritized. She used to thank him. At first. Then came the late replies. The soft, "I'm tired," when he reached for her hand. The unexplained meetings and old friends from France who suddenly became common on her call log. The first time he saw the name William on her screen, he didn't ask, he only memorized the number. One Sunday afternoon, Rachel hosted a small dinner for some of her university classmates. James spent the morning marinating lamb because she had once said French-style grilled meat reminded her of Lyon. He lit candles, played quiet jazz, dressed neatly, but when her guests arrived, she barely introduced him. William walked in 20 minutes late, holding a bottle of Burgundy, and Rachel's face lit up like it hadn't in months. "Will," she beamed, taking the bottle. "You didn't have to." He kissed her cheek. "I did. It's your favorite." James stood by the dining table, watching them speak. The French flowed between them easily, melodic, intimate, laughing at inside jokes he wasn't meant to understand. She looked at William like gravity had shifted, like she forgot the man who had spent the morning ironing napkins for her table. "Do you want a translation?" she asked James later, smiling sweetly as she placed a dish in front of him. "No need," he replied, gently. "I can guess." She kissed his cheek without looking. "I knew you wouldn't mind." He minded, but he never said a word. Later that week, Susan stopped by the office with a box of reports and a concerned look. "You haven't taken leave in 18 months, she said gently. "You know that's not normal, right?" James rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Things at home have been busy." "Busy or heavy?" she asked. He looked up, said nothing. Susan sat across from him, crossed one leg over the other, and waited. "You know what hurts more than being lied to?" she said finally. "Being treated like you're too stupid to notice." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not stupid. I know." She smiled, soft but sad. "But she thinks you are. Or maybe she's just counting on you being too loyal to call her out." That night, James came home to find Rachel on the phone, speaking in French, again. Her tone light, her expression relaxed, legs tucked under her as she curled up on the couch with a wine glass. She barely acknowledged him. "Did you eat?" he asked gently. "I grabbed something with a client," she said, still smiling into the phone. "Don't wait for me next time, okay?" He nodded, walked into the kitchen. There, on the counter, sat the container of chicken wraps he'd brought home for her, still warm, untouched. He placed it in the fridge, and added another phrase to his French vocabulary that night: "Je ne suis pas celui que tu attends," I am not the one you're waiting for. James didn't have to ask any more. Rachel offered lies before the questions could come. "I'll be home late again tonight," she said, brushing on lipstick at the hallway mirror. "It's a client thing, last minute." He stood by the kitchen counter, stirring the soup he'd made, her favorite, ginger pork broth, simmered since morning. "Want me to drop you off?" "No need," she replied, reaching for her heels. "William's swinging by, he's already in the area." James nodded. He didn't blink, just turned the flame down and said softly, "Don't forget your coat, it's getting cold." She smiled absently, then left. He didn't eat that night. In the weeks that followed, the lies sharpened into routine. Rachel stopped pretending to be home late from the office and instead began dropping phrases like, "We're working on a side project," or "William's helping me with logistics." The change in tone wasn't obvious, but James heard it. He heard it in the way she laughed a little too quickly when William's name came up. He heard it when she played French voice messages aloud in the living room, confident James wouldn't understand a word. He heard it in the code switching, the lowered voices, the lingering silences that followed their conversations. One evening, Rachel invited a few friends over for a casual game night. James watched as William took a seat next to her, knees brushing. Rachel leaned in, whispering something that made William smirk. Someone suggested truth or dare. Rachel rolled her eyes in mock protest, but agreed. The bottle spun, the game moved along, then it pointed to her. Susan, who had quietly sat across from James all night, raised a brow and asked, "Truth, have you ever been in love with two people at the same time?" Rachel laughed too fast. "God, that's dramatic." "Answer," William prompted, eyes dancing. Rachel sipped her drink, paused, then smiled coyly. "Maybe I have. But as long as they don't know, is it really a problem?" The room erupted in teasing. William gave her a slow, approving look. Susan didn't laugh. She glanced at James, but he didn't move. Later that night, after the guests had left, James began clearing the empty glasses. In the kitchen, Rachel stood by the sink, humming a French tune softly. He reached over, taking a lipstick-stained glass from her hand. "That song sounds familiar?" She looked at him and blinked. "It's from a film William showed me, a French indie piece. You wouldn't know it." "I might," James said gently. "Hum the chorus again?" She hesitated. "I didn't mean it like that," she mumbled. "You're always so sensitive." He nodded. "That's true." He turned and placed the glass in the dishwasher. The tune stayed with him long after she went to bed. 2 days later, he found an unopened gift bag tucked beneath the hallway console. Inside, a monogrammed scarf with William's initials embroidered. The receipt showed Rachel had paid for it a week ago. He folded it neatly, placed it back in the bag, and left it there. That night, he cancelled their anniversary hotel booking. He called the restaurant they'd reserved and told them to give the slot away. Rachel never asked about it. James started going room by room in the evenings, choosing what to erase. The photo album came first. He scanned every picture, backed it up on a private drive, then shredded the originals. The souvenirs from their first trip, he packed into a box and stored it in the attic. Their matching mugs from college? He rinsed hers and placed it quietly at the bottom of the trash. Bit by bit, he removed himself from the narrative. One evening, James came home to find Susan waiting outside his building. She handed him a manila envelope. "Don't ask how I got these," she said, "but you should see them." Inside were screenshots, Rachel and William A. Orspund, an art gallery, her hand in the crook of his arm. Another of them at a wine bar, laughing over a shared dessert. And one, just one, that showed Rachel leaning into his shoulder, eyes closed. James flipped through them silently, then handed them back. Susan's voice was quiet. "I thought you didn't know." "I've always known," James said. "She just thought I didn't." A week later, Rachel stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking in French again, pacing. He caught just enough. "Il ne saura jamais, il me fait confiance, et tant que tu parles en français." He'll never know, he trusts me, and as long as you speak French. James watched her reflection in the glass. His own face looked back at him, shadowed behind hers. That night, he removed his wedding ring and placed it in the drawer beside their bed. Rachel didn't notice. He started leaving earlier for work, coming back later, turning off his phone on weekends. She didn't question it. James cooked less, stopped doing laundry for two, paid bills on auto. She didn't ask why. One morning, Rachel came out of the shower, hair damp, towel around her. "I'm thinking of redecorating the study," she said absently. "It's too dark." James looked at the framed sketch she was gesturing toward, a drawing he made of her years ago, charcoal on textured paper. She had once said it made her feel seen. "I agree," he said. "We should clear the space." She smiled, already distracted, scrolling on her phone. He looked at her, really looked. The woman he had once memorized, the cadence of her laugh, the curve of her fingers, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen on rainy days, had been replaced by someone distant, brighter maybe, but hollow. Rachel was still there. But the girl who had kissed him behind the science building, whispered secrets between sips of coffee, said she couldn't live without him, was long gone. James no longer mourned her absence. He was simply preparing to disappear the way she had, quietly and completely. It started with a single cigarette. 10 years of restraint, broken in the soft orange light of dawn. James stood on the balcony with the sliding door cracked just enough to not wake Rachel. His fingers trembled as he lit the match. The first drag was bitter, unwelcoming. It scraped against the throat like shame. He didn't even like the taste anymore, but he needed something, anything, that felt like control. Inside, the house remained silent. Rachel was still asleep, curled under the ivory sheets that used to belong to their anniversary set. Her shoulders peeked out from beneath the fabric, bare except for the faint outline of red smudges along her collarbone. He'd noticed them the night before when she stumbled in past midnight, her heels clutched in one hand, perfume clouded with liquor. He hadn't asked where she'd been, she hadn't offered to explain. She had slid into bed with a sigh, curling toward the side William never used to touch, James's side, and when she dozed off, James saw it, the kiss mark under her jaw, the bruise barely hidden beneath her hairline. William wasn't careful, and Rachel no longer cared to cover it. He finished the cigarette and flicked the ash over the edge. Later that day, James stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, apron tied around his waist. He was making her favorite, saffron rice with citrus roasted chicken, the kind he used to make when she had bad days. Rachel had a presentation at work that morning. She came home looking tired. He thought maybe, just maybe, it could be like before. One evening, one peaceful meal. She entered the kitchen just as he was plating. "Something smells nice," she said, tying her hair back. "I thought you'd want a break from takeout," James said. "You barely eat anymore." Rachel smiled distractedly, her phone already in her hand. "Thanks," she muttered, taking a seat without looking up. Her thumbs moved quick. Cly across the screen. A soft chime, another message. James sat across from her in silence. He watched her eat 3 bites before her focus drifted to the phone again. "Is it work?" he asked, though he already knew. Rachel didn't look up. "Just William sending some feedback. We're finalizing some notes." He nodded. "Eat while it's hot." She gave him a short smile, still scrolling. "You know I'm good at multitasking." James said nothing. The food tasted like ash in his mouth. The next morning, James found a receipt on the counter, handwritten card, gift-wrapped package, jewelry boutique, delivery address not theirs. He didn't need to open it, he knew what it was. She had gifted William the compass pendant James once gave her, the one she claimed was her favorite charm, because it always pointed her home. She'd worn it the day she graduated. She used to say it was a symbol of how he kept her steady. Now she had given it to someone else. The irony was almost poetic. James stood there in the kitchen, holding the receipt like a death certificate. Slowly, without ceremony, he crumpled it and placed it in the bin. The next day, Susan stopped by the office with a stack of quarterly summaries. She lingered in the doorway longer than necessary. "You look thinner," she said finally, gently. "Are you sleeping at all?" James gave her a practiced smile. "I rest." Resting and sleeping are not the same thing. He didn't answer. Instead, he signed the document she held, then looked at her, really looked. Susan always had steady eyes. She never pressed, but her gaze lingered now, soft with unspoken knowing. "James," she said quietly, "you don't have to pretend, not with me." He turned his eyes back to the papers. "I'm not pretending." "Then you're disappearing." Her voice cracked slightly. "And I don't know which is worse." Susan stepped closer, but didn't touch him. She just placed a small packet of ginger candies on his desk. "For the ulcers you're probably ignoring." He almost laughed. Almost. That night, James opened the drawer beside their bed. Rachel was in the bathroom, humming softly, her voice slightly slurred from wine. He took out the old shoebox where he kept letters from her, cards from birthdays, scribbled notes from years ago. He held one up. A Valentine's card, year 2. "To the man I'd cross oceans for, don't ever doubt that you're everything to me." She had drawn a tiny boat beside it. He folded it in half, then in half again, then he tore it down the center. By the time she stepped out of the bathroom, he had already burned them in a tin tray on the balcony. She didn't notice the faint smoke. She was too busy texting someone goodnight. James spent the weekend removing himself from corners of the house, the hand-painted mug from their trip to Kyoto, the Polaroid stuck to the fridge with her laughing mid-bite, the recipe book where she'd once scribbled, "James loves this one, extra garlic." He didn't throw them out, he just packed them quietly, vanished them from view. On Sunday, Rachel noticed the empty shelf. "You finally cleaned it," she said, peering in. Looks better without all that clutter. James nodded. It was overdue. She walked away, humming again. He watched her back retreat, remembering the girl who once refused to let another girl flirt with him at a bookstore, who once interrupted a campus play rehearsal just to tell someone, "He's mine." She used to be jealous, proud, fierce. Now, she was indifferent to his pain, indifferent to the fact that he was unraveling in the silence between her texts. At night, James stood in front of the bathroom mirror. He stared at his reflection, the lines under his eyes, the curve of his mouth that had forgotten how to smile. He used to be gentle. Now, he felt hollow. He pulled open the drawer and removed his old lighter. It still worked. He walked out onto the balcony and lit another cigarette. And this time, he didn't put it out when he heard Rachel cough from the bedroom. He didn't care anymore. The morning smelled like rain and bitter coffee. James stood in the kitchen, hands steady on the suitcase handle, his thumb brushing over the worn leather grip he had bought during their honeymoon. It was the only thing he hadn't hidden or thrown out. Through the open doorway, he could see Rachel at the vanity table, dressed in a slate gray dress that hugged her waist, her hair twisted into a polished chignon. She was putting on perfume she had once reserved only for him, amber and rosewood. "I have to go early today," she said, fastening the clasp on a necklace he hadn't seen in years. It was the one his mother had given her on their wedding day. "Important client luncheon. I'll be back before dinner." James watched her reflection in the mirror. She didn't meet his eyes. She smoothed her skirt, checked her lipstick, and smiled faintly at her phone screen. William's name glowed before she turned it face down. "Do you want me to make something for later?" James asked softly. His voice didn't tremble. "No, don't worry," she replied, distracted. "I'm sure William will grab us something while we finalize the contract." The silence after that sentence seemed to stretch a lifetime. She didn't notice. When she stepped out into the hall, heels clicking, she reached for her purse. "Oh," she said absently. "Could you water the plants in the study? I forgot." James nodded once. "Sure." She smiled briefly. "You're the best." She left without a kiss. The door shut. James exhaled, slow and even. He set down the coffee mug, walked to the bedroom, and pulled the suitcase fully upright. Inside were only his things, documents, a few shirts, a laptop, his passport. He had already shredded every trace of his personal accounts, moved money to a private card, erased the backup drives, and cancelled joint plans. He left the house the way one leaves a museum exhibit. No fingerprints, no marks, no sound. On the dining table, he placed a small gift box, dark blue paper, tied with a silver ribbon. Beside it lay a single envelope. Inside were 2 divorce papers, already signed, along with a printed photograph of Rachel and William leaning into each other at a bar, her hand covering his as they laughed. Underneath the photo, a short message in James's handwriting. "You were fluent in deception. I was fluent in everything you said." He placed his wedding ring on top of the box. Then he left, closing the door without a sound. When Rachel returned that evening, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the house felt unnaturally still. She dropped her purse on the console and called out, "James, I'm home. Are you in the study?" Silence. She frowned, walking into the kitchen. The air was clean, no scent of food, no faint music from the speakers he always left playing. Her eyes landed on the box at the table. She smiled nervously, her heart skipping a beat. A surprise? She untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. Inside were the papers. Her breath caught. She read the first line once, twice, 3 times before the words began to sink. Dissolution of marriage contract, signed by James. Her hand shook as she picked up the photograph beneath it. The 2 of them, William and her, caught mid-laugh at the bar. Another from the art gallery. Another from the night of the party, the thin paper between their lips. Pictures she had thought were private, moments she had believed invisible. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it desperately. A new message from James. She opened it, screenshot after screenshot. WeChat posts visible only to him, her gifts to William, her singing on stage for William's birthday, her head resting on William's shoulder. At the bottom of the final message, his words glowed like an incision. "You were fluent in deception. I was fluent in everything you said." Rachel dropped the phone as though it burned. The house swayed around her. She staggered backward and caught herself on the edge of the chair. In her mind, memories flickered like film reels. James smiling at her under cherry blossoms, James standing beside her at graduation with flowers, James whispering, "I'll wait for you," when she boarded the plane to France. James quitting smoking after she wrinkled her nose, James learning to cook when she said she hated restaurant oil. James quietly cancelling his own appointments when she called at midnight from Lyon, crying about coursework. When had he stopped trying? She thought of the hotel he had once booked for their anniversary, how he had cancelled it without telling her. Of the way he had started coming home later. Of the empty shelves she'd called cleaning. She had been too distracted by William's messages to see what was vanishing piece by piece, not just objects, but a man's devotion. Rachel slid to the floor, clutching the papers to her chest. Her phone lit up again. Another screenshot, a close-up of her text to William, "He'll never know, he trusts me." Underneath, one last line from James, "Trust is not ignorance." She pressed the phone to her forehead, eyes squeezed shut. Her chest tightened, images kept flashing, James in the kitchen, quietly placing food in front of her while she texted William, James waiting in the rain to pick her up, James smiling gently when she brushed him off. And she hadn't noticed the moment his smile had turned hollow. Rachel dragged herself up, stumbled to the bedroom. The closet door hung ajar. Half his clothes were gone, his toiletries, his laptop. The smell of his cologne had already faded. She opened the drawer on his side of the bed, empty. The reality clawed at her throat. "James," she whispered, voice cracking. "Don't do this, please don't do this." Her eyes caught the faint imprint left where his ring had sat on the nightstand. She collapsed onto the bed, clutching the box as if it could anchor her, but all it held was his absence. She couldn't even cry properly. She just sat there, shaking, until her phone buzzed one last time. It was a scheduled message. "I learned French the first year you went abroad. Unfortunately, I'll never get to use it now. I wish you and William everything you ever wanted." And then nothing. Rachel's sob finally broke free, echoing off the walls. She pressed her face into her hands and the memory of her younger self whispered back, "I'll only love James in this life." Now she understood what it meant to be fluent in loss. The next morning, Rachel stood outside James's workplace with wind tangled in her hair and panic swelling beneath her ribs. Her heels clicked across the marble lobby as she rushed to the reception desk. "I need to see James Caldwell," she said quickly, forcing calm into her voice. The woman behind the desk blinked at her, brows pulling slightly together. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Caldwell is no longer with us." Rachel's breath caught. "What do you mean? He works here. He's been with this company for years." The receptionist offered a polite, practiced smile. "He resigned last week, effective immediately." "That's not possible," Rachel whispered. "I believe he transferred out through corporate, but his file's restricted, no forwarding contact information." "Do you have an email, a number, anything?" "I'm afraid not, he's off the grid." Rachel stared at the woman as if she hadn't heard her correctly. Then she turned and walked away, faster, almost running now. She didn't stop until she reached the building across the street, climbed 2 flights of stairs, and banged on the office door marked International Projects Division. Susan answered it. Her face dropped the moment she saw Rachel. "Where is he?" Rachel demanded. Susan didn't respond right away. She stepped outside, closed the door behind her, and crossed her arms. "Rachel. I know I don't deserve your help," Rachel said breathlessly, "but please, I just need to talk to him, just once." "He's gone," Susan said, her tone not cruel, just finished. "He didn't tell anyone where he was going, not even me." "That can't be true, you were his closest friend." "I was." Her gaze didn't waver. "Until I watched him spend years dying quietly under your roof." Rachel's throat closed. "I never meant to hurt him." "But you did." Susan's voice softened, not out of sympathy, but exhaustion. "You treated his silence like weakness. It was endurance. He loved you so completely, he gave up pieces of himself just to keep from burdening you." Tears burned at the corners of Rachel's eyes. "I thought I had more time." "You used it all," Susan said simply. "He's somewhere far now, I don't know if he'll ever come back." Rachel didn't remember how she got home, only that her fingers shook as she dialed William's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Rachel?" "You told him," she snapped. "You showed him everything. Why would you do that?" There was a pause. I didn't show him anything he didn't already know. You wanted him gone so you could have me. You were never really his anymore, Rachel, William said, calm and cruel. You gave yourself to me long before he left. You pushed him over the edge. No, William said flatly. He came to me, 2 months ago. Rachel's breath caught. He asked me to back off, said he loved you, said he was willing to forget everything if I left you alone. Rachel gripped the counter for balance. I told him no, William continued, because I knew the truth. He was just a habit for you. I was what you chased when you were honest with yourself. You don't know anything about me, Rachel whispered. I know enough. I know that the man you swore to love begged me for peace, and you let him suffer anyway. That's what broke him. Not me. Rachel dropped the phone. She stumbled to the couch and stared at the gift box still sitting unopened on the table, the one James had handed her early. Their anniversary was today. Her fingers trembled as she tore the wrapping paper. Inside was a photo album, leather-bound, soft and familiar. Her breath caught. It was the one they'd started together when they got married, the one James used to print photos for and scribble little notes beside. She thought he'd stopped adding to it years ago. But it was full. Page after page. Trips, meals, quiet nights in. Photos she didn't know he'd taken, her asleep with a book on her chest, her laughing at a burned cake, her crying with joy the night they first moved in. He had documented everything. His handwriting was still the same. Your first day back from France. You said this dress made you feel like yourself again. The night we danced in the living room with no music. You fell asleep in my lap and called me your home. She was crying now, silently, tears slipping off her chin. Near the end of the book, the photos became less frequent. Then came a blank page, no note, just white, and one line written across the top. If you still loved me, this is where the next photo would go. Rachel clutched the album to her chest and sobbed until she couldn't breathe. Her phone buzzed again. A new email, subject line, anniversary. The body of the email read, Rachel, I kept loving you long after you stopped choosing me. I gave you every part of me, even when you didn't notice. Even now, I don't hate you, but I refuse to love someone who taught me to live without being seen. This album is my goodbye. There was no sender name, no reply option, just the memory of everything she lost. She ran to the closet, tore open drawers, searched for anything that might tell her where he went. She called the airline, his old manager, even his barber. Nothing. James had erased himself so completely it was as though he had never been there at all. Rachel sat on the floor in the mess of her own desperation, sobbing into her hands. Somewhere in her heart, a girl with bright eyes and cherry blossom cheeks was whispering the promise she'd once made. James, I'll love you forever. But forever had come and gone. 5 years later, the sky above the city was dressed in deep gold, streaked with violet. The lights of the National Technology Hall glimmered below, bouncing off polished marble and award plaques held tight in proud hands. James stood near the back of the auditorium, dressed in a sharp black suit, a simple silver pin on his lapel, the emblem of international excellence in research. He looked taller now, sharper somehow. His eyes were quieter, his shoulders looser. The ghost of the man he used to be had long since burned away. The press cameras flashed, questions flew. He answered only when necessary, with words chosen like scalpel strokes, polite, clean, impersonal. A coordinator whispered, Dr. Caldwell, they want one photo of the whole delegation. Could you step closer to the front? He nodded and moved, stepping into the light. That's when he saw her. Rachel. Standing at the far end of the crowd, near the exit doors, in a dark green coat far too large for her. Her hair had lost its shine. Her eyes, once bright, defiant, now seemed dimmed by time and something heavier. There was a sadness etched into her posture, not dramatic, just worn. She didn't move toward him, she didn't dare, but her eyes met his, and she mouthed the words, I'm sorry. James's face didn't change, not even a flicker. His eyes passed over her as though she were just another person standing in a crowded room. Later, outside, the air sharp with winter's edge, James waited by his car. A black sedan pulled up beside him. Rachel stepped out. Please, she said. Her voice cracked. Just 10 minutes. That's all. He stared at her. 5, she corrected quickly. 5 is fine. He gave a small nod. 5. They sat in silence inside the car. The heater hummed low. Her hands shook in her lap. You look... she began, then gave up. I've read everything. Every article, every interview. You did everything you dreamed of. James didn't respond. I couldn't believe how far you went, how much you did. I used to say you were brilliant, didn't I? She gave a weak smile. Back when we were still good. He turned his head slightly toward her. She inhaled deeply, bracing. I was stupid, so stupid. I thought you'd always be there. I took everything you gave and didn't give anything back. I know that now. I know what I did. He said nothing. I tried to find you, for years. I wrote to your foundation. I sent emails. I called Susan. I even went back to the house hoping. She stopped herself. But I never thought you'd really leave, not for good. You did, James said, voice low. You just didn't believe I would choose myself. Her lip trembled. I didn't think you could stop loving me. He looked out the window, then back at her. I didn't, he said. I just stopped loving what I became around you. Rachel's breath hitched. James leaned back. You didn't love me. You loved how much I loved you. That's not the same. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not for just what I did, but for who I became. She wiped a tear quickly, as though embarrassed. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I needed to see you once more, even if it's to say goodbye. You're not the only one who needed closure, he said softly. Her eyes flicked up. James reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn photo. It was the first picture he ever took of her, unposed, laughing mid-bite during lunch on campus. He'd carried it for years. He placed it on the center console between them. I'm giving it back, he said. It doesn't belong in my life anymore. She picked it up like it was made of glass. I don't deserve this. No, James said, but I deserve peace. Rachel nodded, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Are you happy? She asked. He looked at her directly. Yes. A pause. Is there someone else? She asked, barely audible. That's not your story anymore, he replied gently. Rachel bit her lip to keep it from trembling. I miss you, she whispered. James glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Your 5 minutes are up. Rachel nodded slowly, then opened the door. She stepped out into the evening cold, holding the photo to her chest like a last ember. Her back was turned when James rolled the window down and spoke one final time. You once said you couldn't live without me, he said. Turns out you could. She turned slowly. I can too. He rolled the window up and drove away. Not bitter, just free.